Hey, chillin', man. How you feeling, bro?
I'm doing the best I can for the sake of man, brother.
Hey, man, I understand. Yeah, my apologies, bro. I had plans. Plans had to change.
No, I understand that completely. I understand that completely.
But man, I appreciate you doing this. I've been following your content for a good minute, man. And I'm looking forward to the chance just to talk to you about some of your views, how you got started, and really just share you with some of the people that I know about because I've mentioned you. But I appreciate you even allowing me to talk with you today.
No problem, no problem. And I appreciate the time as well, brother. Thank you.
Man, no problem, man. So just so I make sure I'm pronouncing it right, you go by Professor Odi.
Yes.
Professor Odi. Okay, Professor Odi. So I looked at, kind of looked at your title, therapist, holistic life coach, relationship coach. Is there anything else I'm missing as far as a title that goes along with you?
Yeah, I try to tell people that I'm a master's level or pre-licensed because when people hear therapist, they assume that I have a license, and I do not at this moment in time. I've been stuck in a license limbo, having to go from state to state, and the licensure requirements are different. So I just try to make sure that I make that distinction so that people do not, once again, inadvertently give me something that I'm not supposed to have.
Understood. You will have it though. That ain't a thing, man.
That ain't a thing, man. It's just a matter of time.
Bro. You know what? I That's a good starting point for I kind of guess where we want to go today, man. Like, I know that you hang your hat on therapy. What were your early childhood experiences like, and what were some experiences that kind of let you know that therapy was an area that you wanted to work in?
Um, so in a lot of different ways, therapy was not the first thing that I wanted to do, right? It was something that I recognized was a skill that I had over time.
Hmm.
Um, so as a young boy, I was very angry young boy. You dig what I'm saying? A lot of aggressive and a lot of assertive energy. And how it is that that was processed, or how it is that that was, you know, regulated, was through the help of my mother. And it was not as if though she uh, coddled me or anything like, no, she assisted me in real full-time emotional regulation that she was not always there for, but she gave me the tools to identify how regulation could be done. That's one, but also two. Um, I spent a lot of time not only just talking to my mother, but I think that because as a boy, I was not really aligned with quote unquote boy things. So playing sports, like doing the sports thing was never uh it was never something that I felt was welcoming because once again I was not athletic. Like I equated being big with being slow, and being slow meant that you don't get picked for sports. So it's just like it just was not a welcoming space for me. So at the time, the only alternative was to go talk with the girls and talk to the girls and do stuff like that. So when that was happening, I was learning a lot about, once again, how it is that, girls and women face the world, how it is that they feel like the world responds to them. And through that lens, I then went to, once again, through high school, through college. High school was a very interestingly difficult period of time for me. I recognized a lot of, or I identified a number of insecurities, dove through those really dark corners, and came through in college where I was able to access, parts of myself that allowed me to be a little bit more confident. And one of those things was, once again, for the period of time that I stepped on undergrad campus to leaving grad campus, I was consistently like on dean's lists. So the first time I ever made straight A's in my life was actually in undergrad, and I made it in psychology. So I was like, I guess this is a strength that I can lean into. You know what I'm saying? Let's lean into it. So I will say that the idea and the concept of healing has always been around me, but me tapping into it is something that I learned more recently than not.
Understood. Understood. Professor Odi, you know, you're coming from, my assumption is, and based off your accent and based off where you're getting your, you studying, that you came from, Pennsylvania. What inspired you to want to pursue, getting your undergrad and graduate at historically Black colleges in the South, like so far from home? And what did you get from those experiences?
So it's always funny when people assume where it is that I'm from. I live in Pennsylvania. I'm from Chicago.
Oh,
Mhm. Originally from Chicago, Illinois. You dig what I'm saying? And I can still answer the question utilizing that as a framework. Um, I wanted to continue to see the diversity of Blackness that existed outside of what it is that I was being shown. Right? I knew that Blackness existed in such a way where it was progressive, it was positive, and if not still nuanced in its own way, it was still more than what it is that I knew existed around me in terms of neighborhood, in terms of, media representation and things of that nature, right? So I went, and not only that, I love the South, G. Like the South, I firmly believe that the South in a lot of different ways for Black people has historical and like spiritual contexts that you really cannot find anywhere else in the United States. And if we tap into them, they can be very aligning, very fulfilling, and very transformative. But that's the reason why I sought out those environments, because it's like, yo, I've always had this, and now as an adult, I can reflect and say, damn, it might be a little bit of elitism. But as a child, or as a child and adolescent, I've always wanted to, be with very people like my family, right? Black folks who were, wanting to be, who dared to do what was not given to them. Does that make sense?
it does. It does. Okay. Man, for fear of assuming again, because I know what comes with that. Oh, my bad, you there?
Yeah, yeah. I'm here. Sometimes I was, but yeah,
Gotcha.
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, bro. It was a little lag, but
Yeah,
but
it's definitely been lagging. I don't know why, but we're gonna figure this out.
hey, we're gonna thug it out, man. That's the story of the day, man. But no, I was gonna say for fear of making assumptions again, man. I looked at your name and I made an assumption once again. Is it safe to assume that that based off your name you come from an African upbringing or you were raised by African parents?
I was raised by an African parent.
Okay, an African parent. Um, you get a lot of perspective nowadays on the African experience. Like my wife's Nigerian, she talks about what that was like growing up. Like, did your experience mirror her experience in the sense of it was a lot of ignorance that you had to deal with growing up, being raised by an African parent?
Well, not really, because my father married a Black woman, right?
Dig.
A Black American woman, right? There's one, but also two. A lot of my experiences had to do with, specifically from the Nigerian parent, had a lot to do with emotional immaturity, um, the inability to, once again, differentiate between traditional and non-traditional methods of interaction that could potentially be seen as emotionally damaging. Number of different things, but in terms of like ignorance, no, I wouldn't call it that. By the time I was born and then cognizant of that type of social dynamic, my father had been in the United States for almost 2 decades at that point.
Got you. Appreciate you sharing that with us.
Mhm.
Man, I was looking at your LinkedIn and looking at kind of some of your work experience, things that you've done. And like I saw that you worked in a number of capacities from working with adults to working with children. What are some of the biggest takeaways and I guess not even necessarily experiences, but what are some of the biggest takeaways that you've gotten from both working with the youth and working with adults as far as in the need and how were you able to kind of help that?
So I need you to repeat that question, brother, because it was breaking up the whole time he was asking that question.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good. That gets me to get it better. So yeah, I was saying, I checked your LinkedIn out, man, and I saw that you work with adults and you work with children as well. What are some takeaways? What are some things that you learned from your time working with children and working with adults that kind of informed your practice?
Oh man, you did your research, brother. That's
Right.
commendable. My man said I went on the LinkedIn. And I was like, yeah, okay.
No stop. No
So
stop.
my man's know. I'm like once again, and it's very interesting because a lot of people talking about shaping my practice. A lot of people see me on social media and they assume that I'm just a content creator. And it's like, no, 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 no. I need you all to understand that what it is that I'm talking about and what it is that I'm disseminating, the information that I'm disseminating rests on a lot of professional experience and a lot of professional training, right? So my experience with these populations, children and adults, allows me to, in a very real way, engage in conversations from a lifespan perspective or a range instead of just saying things exist on a binary. It's no, 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 no. There is a collective or there is a community-based experience that over this period of time, specifically over this period of time, if we are not mindful and manageable about what it is or what environments, what things we expose this group of people to, it can have wild results, both behaviorally, emotionally, spiritually. Like, you have to be mindful. So that practice and that experience over time has really enabled me to kind of dig into those pockets of conversation that I believe that other content creators who share the same platform aren't necessarily able to do. But it's because it's like, yo, I've had conversations with 16-year-olds about their masculinity. I've had conversations with 40-something-year-old men who are just now beginning to understand that they feel emotions. Like, these are not just things that I make up. I've had to have conversations with 12-year-old girls where they don't know themselves, but they're seeking external validation that puts them in precarious situations. But it's because they're coming from spaces where, once again, they are being consistently policed and questioned about their moralities and their behaviors anyway, which creates an environment of feeling of lack of support. This is not just one side. I can't just make something that specific up. You know what I'm saying? So it being and working in that population, and when I say working, I don't mean in just a teletherapy context either. Boots on the ground, that is much different from what it is that I do now. Much different, right? The needs, the dissemination of energy, the interaction level, right? When I say, like, trying to tell a 16-year-old about life at 26 will put so much shit in perspective for you as an adult, like, damn, I really, like, people are really looking at me as an example, one, but also two, I have the professional capacity to guide this person. How does then that translate into, once again, me as a clinician, me as a coach, me as a person communicating what it is that I communicate? It's like, yo, I've had the experiences where I've had to figure it out. You dig what I'm saying? So I firmly believe that my experiences within that age range specifically has one helped me to see within myself like how I can be more not only just of service, but have a more, once again, empathetic ear, especially in, once again, my offline engagements. And to a degree now, people are saying my online engagements, like, we need you to find a more big brother-esque tone because you have more value to give to consistently be warlike. And I'm like, why are you talking to me in spirit terms? Because I know, God damn it. Like, and once again, it still comes because as somebody who's worked in that population, I know that it's a need. I know that it's a need. Like, brother, on one end of my social media platform, right? On one end, I have 80% women and 75% women and 25% men on my larger platforms. But on my YouTube that's growing, it's 80% men. Threw me for a loop. 80%, and once again, crazy how things work. 80% of men between the ages of 24 and 45. So once again, I know that the need is there. I recognize it. And once again, I see that there are particular things that I am able to communicate, once again, based on my experiences that resonate with individuals in that range. So I pretty much believe that, my experience not only informs that communication on platforms, but it also continues to reinforce my implementation offline.
Thank you for answering it the way you did. And it's, I had a direction where I was gonna go, but I think, because you've kind of broached the subject of your content, that I do think it'd be good to ask some questions regarding that. And one thing I ask you, because like I work in the school systems as well, and I see a younger generation, like you're saying, that's seeking examples of masculine. Like I think you had a video, alternative masculinities for them to embrace. And I guess one of my questions, the first one I ask is, when you look at the quote unquote, gender wars that you see on social media, and then you compare it with conversations that you have offline, how much of it do you attribute to like being real, based in reality, and how much of it is manufactured or weaponized for our destruction?
So that's a very interesting conversation, because when I talk about gender wars, and when we talk about gender wars, I don't necessarily believe that, how can I say this? When we say weaponized for our destruction, it implies that there is an external force or an external power that is shaping ideologies within the community, or shaping ideologies outside of the community and depositing it within the community. That, I don't believe that that's what's happening. What I believe is happening is that there's an internalization of external gender roles, which are then implemented into community structures where they are not congruent. So in other words, a lot of our gender disdain within the Black community comes from us attempting to force each other to engage in roles that really, once again, are not congruent with our cultural reality.
Agreed.
Like it does not fit, right? Blackness as a community entity has always worked on a non-traditional extended family model. Why are you trying to force people into these gender roles? Why? I literally did a very rough and a very like bare bones statistical breakdown of how it is that, we have this conversation about the 50-50 conversation. And I've been saying to Black folks, like, yo, this conversation is not about money. It's never been about money. This conversation is about reciprocation. This conversation constantly is about, and I've said it before, how much money can I pay to not do something? Right? How much material can I provide to this space in order for me to not engage? So once again, we as Black people continuing to internalize relationship structures and ideals that once again are not congruent to the way that we have communally and quite frankly historically have done things, that's what creates this friction in my mind. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. And I think it's an interesting perspective because, I never considered that it could just really just be our internalized thoughts, not as much as specific targeted conversations to create discord. Maybe that's an effect, but maybe it's not per se intentional. Well, let me ask you this then, because I know you typically, you get a lot of hate from the quote unquote manosphere, red pill guys. And my question to you would be, when you look on social media, you see all these different camps. You see the red pill, you see divestors, you see Black male study crew. Like, you see a lot of different group thoughts on how Black people can solve or address the relationship dynamics. When it comes to this range of like extreme ideas on all sides, what do you think is and this is nuanced, but what do you think is the most moderate approach that we should take? And I think you've hit on some of it, talking about how the roles have to fit our communal needs, but what's the most moderate approach for if I'm a younger male or younger woman and I'm looking at the landscape?
When you say a moderate approach to what exactly?
I guess my question, or a better way to say that, is what is the best mindset one should adopt when looking at how relationships should go for men and women? Because you have some saying, okay, it's, like the red pill guys are saying what they're saying, divestors are saying what they're saying, different people in different pockets have different solutions. But what's the reasonable mindset that you should have as a young man and young woman when you're looking at a relationship within your community?
I don't think there's any one way to answer that question. The reason being is because when we say should, it implies that there's a right way, right? I don't believe that there's a right way. I do understand that there are some ways that can be perceived as wrong. In my mind, the reality of the situation is that a great relationship dynamic, in my mind, rests on two things: your ability to communicate and reciprocate that communication, and your ability to empathize with your partner. That's it, right? The management, growth, and development of a relationship, especially a Black relationship, requires, once again, a lot of that empathy, because we as Black people usually are coming from some type of background of either, whether it be some type of trauma, whether it be some type of, once again, adverse childhood experience, whether it be some type of relationship trauma, not being able to lead with empathy first and foremost, right? Having the idea that you are, once again, owed something without reciprocation. And this is what I mean when I say communication. The idea that you are owed something without reciprocation does not only just exist within a material space, it also exists within an informational and a communal space. If you withhold particular information, you can manipulate the situation. I don't have to tell you this, or I shouldn't have to tell you this. Why? You are being non-communicative in a way that does not allow this person to reciprocate your need. So once again, how are you approaching building something and you are not willing to give material? Makes absolutely no sense.
Okay.
So this whole concept of man and or woman at these extreme ends, or red pill versus divestors, if you are not aware of how it is that you show up to a relationship, you will never believe that you're the problem. So once again, developing a healthy relationship, a healthy Black relationship, in part requires developing a healthy Black self. Who are you first? Did that answer your question?
It did. And I like the stance that you took in the sense of, because I've kind of gotten more acquainted with the idea of positionality and how our perspectives on right and wrong are reflectives of our position. So I like how you didn't say, hey, look, this is the answer. This is the right answer. You more so said, look, from a personal perspective, your personal ability to communicate and show up and reciprocate determines it. And that's just in any dynamic friend, relationship, friendship relationship, or romantic relationship. So no, I appreciate the insight. Let me ask you this, because you mentioned it. When it comes to the health of Black people, which I know you are, that's your mission. What are some basic psychological concepts that we need to understand as Black people in America in order to become better? And I think of razors, I think of certain psychological razors or maxims, but without getting too into the hairs. But what are some, if I'm listening to this, if you understand these basic things and these concepts, then you'll have a better understanding of what it is that, Black trauma and Black health is.
8 words. Stop listening to white folks about Black people.
That's it.
Stop listening to white folks about Black people. You said without getting into the hairs, right? We're not even gonna have to get to the follicle. We can just stay at the motherfucking do. Listen, y'all have to understand that most of the ways in which we contextualize and frame Black experiences are through a white lens or a white gaze. The more you practice removing whiteness from your evaluation of Blackness, scientifically, the higher your subjective well-being and quality of life is. Start fully rejecting the idea, any concept of white supremacy. Just start questioning it, no matter what it is. Why do we have to behave this way? Why do we behave this way? Is this the only way that we can behave? Not saying that it's right or wrong. Once again, let's diversify some of the intellectual or ideological bases that we derive our behavior or our beliefs from. I can guarantee you will begin to feel, if not less, more confident in the ability of your Blackness being able to navigate hostile environments. Stop listening to the white folks about Black people. Just know there's literally, anthropologically, there's been no return on investment for it, psychologically, or spiritually, or emotionally. Just stop.
Bet you won't put that on a shirt. Professor Odi, break this concept down for me. And I'm vaguely familiar with it, but for people who are not as familiar with the realm of mental health, what is the difference between psychology, psychiatry, and therapy?
Okay. So psychology is the discipline. Psychiatry and therapy are how you practice said discipline. Therapy is somebody who usually has a master's degree and a license. A psychologist is usually somebody who has a PsyD or a PhD and can have a license or can exist in academia. A psychiatrist is somebody who usually has a medical degree or a degree in osteopathic medicine, meaning a DO, and they can prescribe medication based upon neurobiological imbalances that exist within your neurochemistry. That is the difference between the three. So in other words, master's level licensed, they can diagnose, they cannot prescribe medication. Psychiatrists can prescribe medication, they can also diagnose. Psychology is the study of immediately observable human behavior and how it is that it applies to that individual organism's life.
Thank you, good sir. I'm going to come back to that question, but you mentioned a good point, and I do want to talk about this because it doesn't get enough attention. When you look at once again, because I have to go back to, when you look at the traumatic experiences that involve Blackness, what role does spirituality play in your practice? And what should be our attitude towards spirituality as we see the world around us progressively change?
How spirituality informs my practice is very much so similar to how it is that an encyclopedia informs you writing an essay. And what I mean by that is I don't believe anybody's spirituality is quote unquote wrong. It's just the way that they perceive the world through a spiritual lens. And from that production, you have things that are amazing and things that are not as amazing, right? We tend to get into this cosmological pissing race as if though one of these venerations of our spiritual Lord and Master is better or worse or right or wrong than the other. I don't believe that to be so. If God is omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient, then how can we, as human beings who can barely see outside of a motherfucking, once again, our light perception, our ability to perceive light is one of the narrowest in the animal kingdom. Our ability to perceive sound is one of the shallowest in the animal kingdom. Our ability to project our voices is one of the least distance in the animal kingdom. Our ability to make our legs and limbs operate in such a way where it can get us across the terrain is some of the worst in the animal kingdom. Yet we have the audacity to say that the way that we perceive God is the ultimate. No. We cannot monopolize the image of God because in every single religious text, there is a quote, a scripture, a saying that basically says, your understanding of me is not based on you, it's based on me. Which means that any form I present myself in is an accurate form. You can fight over it, you can be angry about it, but the reality of the situation is this is how it exists. Anything that happens below that in my mind is man-made. So for me, religious infighting is always man-made. Why? Because you're attempting to assert that you are right. That for me means that you are attempting to control something. So when you come to me as it relates to my practice, I'm going to ask you what you believe, and then we are going to walk through how it is that you apply that belief system to your growth. Because your understanding of God is not my business. It just is not. Does that answer your question?
It did. Professor Odi, I have it's kind of like an inverse of what you mentioned as far as people that read and listen to things that I post. A lot of men, some women on the periphery as well. And so, my goal is to offer both sides, valuable content. What advice would you give? What advice would you give to Black men on whichever end of the spectrum, whether they may view themselves as healed or working towards that? And on the other spectrum, what advice would you give to Black women who view themselves as healed and those who are working towards healing? What advice would you give them in regards to how they should pursue wellness?
Stop trying to get to a point where you are healed. Stop that. Right? This is not to say that you are in a perpetual state of suffering. It's not to say that at all. Right? It's also not to say that you're in a perpetual state of trauma. What it is to say is that if you position yourself as above somebody because you are quote unquote healed, how much of you actually healed? Right? So if you are utilizing your wellness to position yourself as superior to somebody else, you may be mentally and emotionally well, but what about your spiritual wellness? And how long will this feeling of wellness continue until somebody comes to you and is like, yo, I mean, yeah, what you're doing is nice, but you're also kind of holier than thou with it. How do you regulate that? Oh, I thought I was doing okay. You push this. So once again, this may be something else that you need to regulate. Healing is not a destination. Healing is a journey. You've heard this thousands of times before. I will add something else to it. Healing is a practice. Healing is a practice. This is the reason why you have hospitals. This is the reason why you have doctors. This is the reason why you have all of these things. It is a practice. You believing that you are going to get to a healed state is you still attempting to tell yourself that at some point in time, I'm going to be or get better. It's like, that's still operating in the future. How are you showing up now? Are you being mindful of how it is that you are in the present? Right? Are you being accepting? Are you extending grace to? Are you, you know what I'm saying, showing gratefulness for who you are in the present? Because there are parts of you that you prayed for and that prayer came to pass. Right? There are parts of you that you worked for and now you no longer have to exert as much energy. Balance. It is not healed. It is practicing healing.
Thank you for that terminology, because that's not going to be a part of my word bank. You know, that practicing healing, because it's a practice. It's not a destination. It's a practice. Define Black wealth.
The ideas, cultures, practices, and, if necessary and available, economic and material resources being passed from one generation to the next with an intent to secure and grow said things.
Professor Odi, what's the best way for people to take advantage of your services, connect with you, and learn more about your content?
So you can find me at or on most platforms as Professor Odi or Professor _Odi. I was just informed by my followers on Instagram that they are more wanting to engage in one-on-one services over courses and things of that nature. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of retooling on how I'm going to be doing my offering. But my plan is to continue to provide one-on-one coaching services, but there will be different packages associated with based upon what it is that you want to learn. So my entire platform is based upon a paradigm that was presented by KRS-One in his book, The Gospel of Hip Hop First Instrument. It's called H-Law, right? So H-Law is 4 pillars: health, love, awareness, and wealth. In my coaching engagements, it's mental health, love, awareness, and wealth. And all 4 of these things can, once again, be engaged with me on a one-on-one basis. Or if you are less like my followers, you can engage in some of the courses and ebooks that I have available on my e-platform, my e-learning platform. And all of these things can be found on my link tree in both my TikTok and my Instagram bios.
Which app is the best way to, I guess, connect with you? Is there one that has a preference to the other where you're more likely to respond?
So with TikTok, my inbox is always swamped. So if you're trying to literally engage in my services, my Instagram is set up where it is automated based upon You can either send me a keyword, or if you go on my link tree, all of those things are connected in such a way where you're able to actually procure, or at the very least learn more about my services, and also join my email list. So my Instagram is a little bit more active, I would say. Interactive. TikTok is more active. Instagram is more interactive.
Professor Odi, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk with me. I know you have another service that you get ready to have to head to. Are there any parting thoughts that you want to share to people that are listening, that are followers and upcoming followers?
Yeah, man. This is a journey, G. This is a journey, sincerely, and everybody is on a different leg or a different lap or a different length of that journey. So once again, learning how to approach the world, yourself, and other people more gently goes much further than you have probably been taught to believe. So approach yourself gently.